I'm Stephanie Williams, a writer extraordinaire, and you are listening to the Nerd by Word.
Happy Monday! No, seriously, that means you get a brand new episode of the Nerd by Word podcast, the only show where Trekkers and Jedi sit down at the table of fellowship, where true believer mighty Marvelites and whatever DC fans call themselves gather together to nerd out about all things in the multiverse.
Salty boys and girls is what the DC fans call themselves, Chris. Salty boys and girls.
Today, we have a very special interview with writer Stephanie Williams. She's written for sites like Nerdist, Sci-Fi, Rotten Tomatoes. She also produced my favorite indie comic of 2020, Living Heroes, which is a crazy mashup of Marvel superheroes and the 90s sitcom Living Single. So we'll be sure to dive into that as well. But first, our senior video game correspondent, Dave, is in the field at his home with some nerd news.
There is a big field right behind my home, and that's where I'm at. I got some Star Wars news that actually has got me excited, and it has nothing to do with movies or television. I think our long national nightmare is officially over. It appears that Electronic Arts no longer holds exclusive license to make Star Wars video games anymore. When I heard this news, I felt a disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices cried out in joy. Without joking, I mean, this is great news, and we got our first inkling that things are about to change when it was announced that Ubisoft is working on a massive open-world Star Wars game. Now, given Ubisoft's track record, they certainly are able to make open-world games. Their efforts in recent Assassin's Creed games and, of course, the Far Cry series show they've got that kind of gameplay down pat at this point. Now, here's hoping they will not overstuff the map with busy work, but instead with meaningful quests and side quests, a little less Far Cry, a little more Horizon Zero Dawn, if you get my meaning. Lucasfilm Games has also announced that they are working with Bethesda studio Machine Games on a new Indiana Jones game. And this just gives me goosebumps. Is it possible that Disney has finally figured out that they need to partner with great developers to make money off of video games? Machine Games has been working on Wolfenstein games for a while now, so they know all about setting a larger-than-life hero up against Nazis. You know, in short, there are some really cool Lucasfilm-related video games on the horizon, and I'm really excited about that. I was so disappointed with the two Battlefront games that came out of this EA exclusivity deal. And now that things are opening up and more developers can get a little taste of Star Wars and put their own stamp on it, I think we're going to see a much bigger variety of gameplay styles, a bigger variety of genres represented as Star Wars games, and I think that is very exciting. I'm very optimistic about getting good Star Wars games, more optimistic than I've been in a long time. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, if you wouldn't have made this your story, it would have been mine. Particularly the Ubisoft idea. I've made no secret my love for the Assassin's Creed franchise, and particularly with like the timeline reset. When they went to Origins with Egypt, when they went to Odyssey with Greece, and now I'm playing Valhalla in Scandinavia and the UK, and it just gets better and better and better. Particularly the last three games have been out of this world, and I'm just so excited with the prospect of just transplanting that idea into the Star Wars universe, because it's so ripe for it. Like, it's begging. This is a game that's begging to be made. It's this type of game. It's funny that with like the news stories that I saw with this leak, it was an image of Cal Kestis from Jedi Fallen Order, which an open world Star Wars game by Ubisoft is what that game should have been, and why it was such a letdown for me. It had all the makings of it, and it had all like the bare bones of it, but you're done with that game. I finished it in 2 days. and it's just like the solo campaign, which was nice, but then after you finish the main story, there's nothing else to do except go back and collect like cloaks and things. Like it's so I'm so glad that I rented it out of Redbox and only spent like $6 rather than paying $60 for the full price. And even now it's on like Game Pass as part of the EA thing. And I have I mean I downloaded it, but I haven't even touched it because there's no point. I've beaten the campaign. There's nothing else to do with it. So like I'm so geeked out about this. I can't even say enough. Like it's just a perfect game concept. It's just the perfect idea. And then going to the Indiana Jones game, like this is super exciting as well because I fondly remember the last time they made an Indiana Jones game on like the original Xbox and how much fun I had playing that. So, and that was probably 15 years ago or more. So updating that in today's market and the things that they're able to do in the gaming industry now is just it's just so much fun to speculate. Much more excited about the Indiana Jones game than I am the movie, though.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. Um, Obviously, I had an interesting exclamation when we first discussed, the idea of ancient Harrison Ford saddling up as Indiana Jones again. But yeah, I'm really, really excited about these video games. I think there's some good games on the horizon, and this just it kind of brightened my day. Now, Chris, talking about brightening our days, let's go ahead and go the opposite way with a really, really weird story. What you got?
Okay, so we've talked previously about the curious case of Ray Fisher and Warner Brothers, and so it looks like this has taken another turn, possibly a crescendo, because Ray Fisher has indeed been written out of the Flash film. He took to Twitter. Ray Fisher took to Twitter himself and posted a rather extensive statement. I highly recommend you check it. I'm not going to read the entire thing. It's quite extensive, but it's really really interesting to look at. Really eye opening over the situation. But he did confirm that he has been written out of the Flash film, and in a role that would have been quote so much more than a cameo. So it seems like WB is all intents and purposes parting ways with Ray Fisher going forward, and they're not recasting the role. Um, Much of the statement was geared towards opening criticism towards DC Films president Walter Hamada, who Fisher claims covered for former co-president Jeff Johns, famed comic book writer, who kind of was phased out of the executive branch of DC Films, but that they were more than happy to do away with Joss Whedon because they had no future dealings with him, and that Whedon and even John Berg were an easy target, easy ones to get rid of. But he claims that Walter Hamada was very, very protective of Jeff Johns, and that most of the issues that took place on the set from all three were accusations of racism from Fisher's part. So it just looks like it's a really, really sticky mess. Fisher says that I cannot, in good conscience, continue working with Warner Brothers films because they are enabling things like this to happen. So it's a really, really unfortunate situation. I think the world of Ray Fisher. I think he was in a film that, upon revisiting the original Justice League theatrical cut, I don't have a whole lot wrong with it, if I'm being honest. And there are some elements that definitely need to be improved. But I think by and large, he is one of the strongest elements of that film. So I'm sad to see him go. And if indeed he was subjected to this type of behavior, which he calls blatant racism from Johns and Whedon and Berg, it's just frustrating that if they indeed are covering for him, that this is happening. And I really wish that he was able to continue playing this role because he's so fantastic in it.
I really don't know what to say about any of this. The whole situation is just to me the height of bizarre at this point. And I feel really bad for Ray Fisher and all this because I think he, genuinely tried to call attention to a problem. Um, and I'm concerned that the guy has really been put in a position where his career is going to suffer. Perhaps even beyond just working with Warner or DC in particular. I'm really hoping that this kind that he doesn't basically have a mark on him, like an actor who makes waves or makes things difficult for executives, because we all know that people in power like to stay in power, and so I'm worried for the guy. On the flip side, I don't like how it happened, but there is, uh, to a certain extent, creatively speaking, I still believe that the Flash movie should be predominantly Flash. I don't think there should be multiple Batman. I don't think there should be a cyborg. I think we need a movie that's just the Flash. And so I really wished, from the creative side, that that's what Warner was actually pursuing, rather than removing Ray Fisher for some kind of as some kind of revenge or something. That they would just kind of purge that movie of all these 8 billion cameos and just make a good Flash movie. But yeah, this situation is just absolutely bizarre and heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Yeah, I've just as a DC fan, I feel like this whole thing has left a real stink on DC produced movies for the future.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's really unfortunate if that is indeed the case, and he doesn't get a lot of work going forward, because he came out of nowhere. I believe this was his first serious job, and to come on so with such a strong performance and then to be basically blacklisted would be just awful. And I totally echo your sentiments about the Flash film. I think they're putting the cart before the horse again. They're trying to do a Flashpoint film before they even establish a solid character in the Flash. Like that should mean something. And I'll go back to what you said about alternate universes and things. We should have a basic understanding of the character, and it should be basically established in this film universe, before we even think about going to a multiverse situation. And that's not been done. I mean, Ezra Miller was barely, featured in Justice League. Certainly not enough to go into the next project that he's a part of is this big universe multiverse crossing event.
And I'm going to say it. I enjoy a lot of the comic books written by Jeff Johns. There's some good stuff in there, but I think we need to stop on the movie side of things, just trying to adapt his work almost exclusively, from a lot of the animated features to Justice League basically being based on his New 52 relaunch of Justice League, to now the Flash being based on his story Flashpoint. I think we need to back off on that. Even the Green Lantern, to some extent, was inspired by Jeff Johns' run on Green Lantern. And so let's remember that DC Comics has an incredibly rich, long history, that there are fantastic characters. There have been fantastic writers before Jeff Johns. There will be fantastic writers after Jeff Johns. DC, the movie division, does not need to become the Jeff Johns show. There are other creators' works that would probably lend themselves better to adaptations. I've said it before, I think Grant Morrison's work would be ideal for a Justice League movie. I would say that Mark Waid's work would be significantly better as a foundation for a Flash movie. And frankly, Greg Rucka's work should be a blueprint for a Wonder Woman movie. And if you want to get a good Superman movie, there are so many different things you can look at. But I have a feeling, since Jeff Johns had a run on Superman, ironically with Richard Donner, that if we would ever get a Superman movie, that it would also be inspired by Jeff Johns' run. And again, there are better templates for cinematic adaptations than just the work of Jeff Johns.
Well, and when you lay it out like that, when he's the co-president, or he was co-president, so hopefully like they'll change it up going forward. But when he was the co-president of DC Films, it's like it's a classic case of being surrounded by a bunch of yes men. Because I mean, it's no coincidence that he's the co-president of the film division, and all of the movie adaptations, film adaptations, are his versions of those characters. I mean, like it's too centric around one creator, one voice, and you're stifling out any other type of vision. And so then it's no surprise if you know he is indeed guilty of some misconduct, that they would, try and cover it up and do hush hush, because they're putting all their eggs in the Jeff Johns basket.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, even the Wonder Woman movie was co-written by Jeff Johns. So, we need to switch up, definitely, on the DC side of things. That's what I would say. We definitely need to switch up. And to circle back around to the Ray Fisher situation, that whole thing is just regrettable, uncomfortable from top to bottom.
Absolutely. All right, that wraps up our Nerd News segment. When we return from our first break, we'll be sitting down with writer Stephanie Williams. Stick around. All right, welcome back, nerds. We are here with writer Stephanie Williams. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining the show today.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you so much for the invite.
So we always like to start our interviews with our guests, like, nerd origin story. Like, what's your amazing Fantasy 15? Like, when did you first realize that you were a nerd, and what pointed you in the direction to where you are now and being a writer?
Okay, so the first time I actually realized I was a nerd was the sixth grade. I had found like a couple sleeves of Pokemon cards in the desk that I was in because we were like switching classes or whatever. And I was extremely excited about finding this because there were a bunch of holographic cards. So there was like a Charizard, a Blastoise, a Venusaur. This person really messed up because those, I think there was a Hitmonchan. Like there was a bunch of stuff, and I was like about to pass out because one, maybe this was wrong on me, but I was like, whoever lost it because it's not going to the lost and found. I'm taking it home with me. And on the way back home on the school bus or whatever, I like was showing my friends, and they were like, "Girl, what is that?" And that's when I knew they looked at me as though I had grew a second head, and that was the moment I knew. I was like, yeah, you're a nerd. Like I was doing super nerdy stuff before then or whatever, but I think I just nerded out so hard in that moment. And that was the first time I either really paid attention to someone's reaction or really nerded out like that in front of some friends. And they were like, not sure what that is, but are we watching 106 in Park later on today? So that was the first moment I realized. And what set me on that path is just having an older brother. So he was like really big in playing like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and Street Fighter and Marvel like go hand in hand
Yeah.
because Capcom. And I remember I forgot what Street Fighter it was, or if it was even Street Fighter, but I just remember seeing like Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, like on my TV screen as he was like playing the game, and I just kind of gotten to it. And he also had comics, so um, I don't remember the issue exactly, but he had an X-Men comic, and either Storm was on the cover or in the book, one of the two. And I just kind of gravitated towards that because I remembered her from the video games. And then the animated series, coincidentally enough, was coming on Fox Kids. And then I actually sat down and watched it, and I was like, this is amazing. And that just kind of snowballed into this thing. And then I started noticing, like, when we went to the grocery store, they had like a rack of comics. So I think I saw like Batman. This is when he had the long ears. And aesthetically, that was just pleasing to me for whatever reason. So I remember picking that up. And at one point, Spider-Man 2099, because I really love that blue. Again, aesthetically, it was pleasing to me. So I picked it up, and I just remember picking up comics randomly, either if we were at the grocery store or my grandmother loved going to the thrift store, like before Goodwill, before it was the cool thing to do. And I would find so many comics there. Like I was in comic heaven. Some of those I wish I would have kept because I don't know, maybe I found gold and I just didn't know it. But that's just kind of been my thing. And then from there, I started getting into different fandoms like Star Trek and Star Wars. I was really big on those prequels. I'm so sorry, but it's only like 10. So For whatever reason, like they just really appealed to me. And then of course I went back to watch the older Star Wars or whatever. But that's that. I've just been, then got into anime thanks to Toonami. So it's been a smorgasbord of nerdy things, but I've always been in the thick of it.
That's awesome, and I will totally endorse your statement about Batman's ears. The longer ears always look better than the shorter ears.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about those long ears. Like I just kind of, I don't know, like it's just aesthetically pleasing. There's no rhyme or reason. Let me not even try to make like make it sound like it's more than what it is.
So, who are your favorite heroes, sort of in the nerd world, and what do you find appealing about them?
So definitely Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley. Those are the first, and also I would have to add Uhura from Star Trek as well. And um, why am I blanking on Whoopi Goldberg's character's name in Star Trek? Gwina. I
Guinan.
felt I hope Gyna. Okay, like it was something. But those four, just because like they just really had this presence, and then just speaking specifically about Ellen Ripley, um, I don't know, like that first Alien, unfortunately, when I was younger, I found that boring. I definitely love and don't feel that way now as an adult. But that second one, Aliens, I was just like, this woman is here leading these Marines and is, I don't like being more brave than them because she's already encountered this monster before, and I just ate it right on up. Same thing with Terminator. I actually thought that not John Connor, but why am I blanking on his dad's name? I watch this movie all the time. Kyle? Yes. I thought that Kyle was ruining Ripley's day. I actually wrote about that later, but I just thought like he was ruining her day. Like this woman had her day off. And now her life has been turned upside down because she has to give birth to the one person that's supposed to save the human race. And I loved her transformation from, this not timid woman, but this woman who's just like, again, just getting by. And then she meets this guy, and there is this killing machine after them, and she's terrified and scared for her life. But by the end of the film, she is this badass that's just ready to do what needs to be done to make sure that D-Day doesn't happen.
That's just fascinating, and you say Guinan. I love Next Generation so much, and it's such a testament, I think, to Whoopi Goldberg's presence as well, that she didn't
Yes.
really do a whole lot in this show. She just had this presence, this aura around her that you knew that she was in command. She may have been the bartender. She may have just been like the ear that everybody would go talk to, and all this stuff, and go for advice, even Picard. But then like
Hmm.
she was always in control, and you knew that she was a badass. Like she didn't even have to do a whole lot. It was just incredible.
And I think that's probably another aspect that I really appreciated and loved about that because, I mean, of course, I would love a black woman to be doing action, but I think I like the fact that she was in such command and didn't really have to lift the finger. Something about that I don't know, like really spoke to me, and I loved it on down. Star Trek has just always been kind of near and dear to my heart anyway, because reruns. Shout out to reruns and not having cable because you get to experience all the things. But yeah, I just really love that, she was the person that's they're coming to ask for help or just like her opinion or whatever. And just the fact that she just had such a commanding presence and didn't have to like run around like a red shirt. She could just be the bartender and be Gucci. So I love that.
I'll never forget the scene with her and Riker going back and forth, and Wesley is just trying to learn how to spit game, and it's just the two of them going back and forth.
Oh, you're making me. I might need to do a rewatch. I'm gonna have to do one.
So you have a really beautiful NPR piece that is on your link tree, and you talked about how comics really brought you through some tough times. So what are some of your like go-to stories or characters or arcs that always help to lift your spirits?
It's gonna have to be the first run of Miracle Man. I'll actually throw in the second one too. But I bring up that first one because I don't like you really get the foundation of him and Big Bardo's relationship. And the reason why the relationship appeals to me so much because next to comics, romance novels are like my jam. So I think this is probably one of the first comic series that I've read where the character's relationship with someone else that was not a friend was actually, I don't know, like well thought out, and Barda isn't minimized in any kind of way, which I love because that often happens. And even when she has her moments when she's being vulnerable or whatever, it's not used against her. She's just able to be that because, you know, superheroes should be able to be vulnerable and not just pass out because they're too strong. So um, it always just, I probably read that series maybe 4 times a year because I just really love the story. And Jack Kirby, man, if he didn't write comics, he should have been writing romance novels because he had the keys.
Yeah, big Big Barda in general is just such a great character and one that I just don't think we see enough of in modern DC comics anymore. Just a
I couldn't
fantastic
agree more.
character, yeah.
Yeah.
So, in addition to writing, you're also a fellow podcaster. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So, a friend of mine talked me into podcasting and I was like, well, what the heck would I talk about? I'm like, you should talk about what you already talk about, which is, you know, what you're reading, as far as comics are concerned, what you're watching, all of that. So, I started the Lemonade podcast, which was, man, it is really hard to do a podcast by yourself because like you're just talking. So you have to kind of be mindful of just the dead air. But I started doing that and I enjoyed it because again, like I was already talking about it with friends, so might as well share it with everyone else. So I did that, and then Misty Nights Uninformed Afro I did as well, and that was a podcast that was near and dear to my heart because it focused on Black superheroines, but kind of going at an academic approach. So I got to research and research and research my little heart out, which I love to do because research is like writing, but not really. At least that's what I tell myself now. But I got to do that, and I loved it because letting folks know like, hey, just because like Storm isn't the only black superheroine out there. I know people know that, but a lot of people don't. So it was nice to like introduce folks to Misty Knight if they didn't know of her. Same thing with Monica Rambeau, or at least introduce them to more stories than they've seen. Because through the research, I found that one, it's kind of hard to research these characters because a lot of them don't have solo books. In fact, outside of like Storm, none of them really have any solo books. And that was, I don't know, it was two things. I think one, it just pushed me towards wanting to write comics more. Like that's always been a desire. But when that, not even necessarily a realization, but when that was just, I was just reminded of that. I'm just like, wow, I would really love to write a Storm or my own character or Monica Rambeau or someone like that. Because like I feel like they could have a standalone series. I mean, hell, if Multiple Man can have one, Monica Rambeau damn sure could. So, and no, and that's no shade
we
to
we
Multiple Man. Like I
we
like
love you,
Multiple Man.
Jamie. We love you, Jamie.
Yeah,
But come on.
yeah, I do love you, Multiple Man. But um, yeah, that was just a really great podcast because again, like it really appealed to um the STEM side of me and just doing the research and trying to piece together information and present it to folks. So Misty Nights Uninformed Afro is actually what led me into writing. Because when that podcast came to an end, it was like I got all this research that I still haven't covered, and there's still stuff that I want to talk about. So I ended up pitching a couple pieces to fangirls, and it just kind of went from there. And the two pieces that I pitched, one was about the evolution of Dora Milaje because my mind was blown after I'd seen Black Panther and just how they were in the movie compared to our introduction to them and pre-sprung of Black Panther. Like it was just such a huge difference, and I was like, I need people to know this. Like I need them to know that these characters went from being, 14-year-old girls to grown women with their own lives outside of T'Challa. So that, and the other one was superheroines dealing with different forms of misogynoir, which I thought was important because sometimes folks think just because you got superpowers you don't deal with certain things. And I'm like, hey, no, people are still testing them, even though they could strike them down with a bolt of lightning. No, they are still being tested. So I was really happy that those were my first pieces for them, and it just really snowballed from there.
So in addition to your freelance writing for some amazing sites like Sci-Fi Fangirls, Marvel, AV Club, Nerdist, What to Watch, Rotten Tomatoes, you also scribe 2 webcomics. Tell us about But What If Though and Parenthood Activate.
Okay, so Parenthood Activate was my very first webcomic, and that came out of the fact that I was already sharing like parenting triumphs and struggles on Twitter. And I noticed that sometimes, or a lot of times, those would go viral. So I'm like, okay, well, that must mean that folks are interested. And again, like I've been wanting to write comics, but wasn't really sure how to go about it. So I spoke to a good friend named Regine Sawyer, and she was like, hey, just, do the thing. Like, if there's an artist that you want to work with, reach out to them and go ahead and do that. So there was an artist, Sarah Macklin, who had done some cover art for the Misty Nights Uninformed Afro podcast. And I told her about the idea, and she loved it. She had a art style that she thought that would fit it perfectly, and it does. And it just kind of went from there. I think maybe there were 1 or 2 pages out before But What If Though came to be, because that was always an idea that I had in the back of my mind, but I wasn't sure as far as like artist was concerned, like what I wanted to do with that. So I saw that O'Neill Jones had her commissions open. I was at a baby shower and in between games or something like that. And I slid into her DMs and I was like, hey, would you be open to doing like a comic page for your commission? She was like, yeah, sure. So I gave her the first script was Batman and his contingency plans, and him not realizing that Vixen's hair wasn't necessarily part of her power set, but because it's Bruce, he had to go ahead and keep tabs and just make sure that if the time came, he would know how to take her out. Like he wants to know how to take out everybody else. So that grew into a thing. And actually, the second page for that webcomic was the pilot, I guess you would call it, for Living Heroes. So that happened and blew up. I mean, I was just playing around when I made that script. I was watching Living Single and I was like, what if Misty Knight had to move in with, I don't know, Storm and Monica because the Phoenix died again? Because for whatever silly reason, she decided to move back in with Jean Grey. And it just kind of went from there. And then we did a second page with Power Couples Court with Neymar, Sue, and Reed Richards. And then, because at first I was actually just going to just make that the whole page. I was like, well, no, this feels like a show that would exist in this Marvel 227 is what I'll call it. This feels like it would exist there. So end up putting Misty Knight in it, and then having Sam enter, and then it just turned to again snowballed into a whole thing. And next thing I knew, I was like trying to figure out Kickstarter, and thankfully it funded, and now Living Heroes exists in its entirety. I would love to do a season 2.
Well, I'm sitting here like holding my physical copy, and just like I gotta tell you, it's like a love letter to like both like the show and like Marvel Heroes, but then also like Black culture at large. So I have a just like some preface, like I have a very unique background. I'm a white guy, but I was raised by a black man. I don't like to use the S word, but stepfather. So
Yeah.
my dad came into my life when I was 6 years old, and that's the upbringing that I have. I grew up in black barbershops. I grew up,
Yeah.
so I look at the back cover and I see all these different hairstyles, and I was like, oh my god, I get it. So all down to the fact where like just like the Jet beauty of the week is when you open the page. I remember going to the babysitter's house and sneaking off with the Jet magazine and so, getting in trouble. But so I just love this book so much, and it's just like a love letter to all parts that are encapsulated in this.
Thank you so much. And it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of people have said that to me, and I'm just like, that was, I don't want to say that that wasn't the intent, but it kind of also wasn't the intent. And by that I mean I was just, I guess, I'm subconsciously just putting all that has been my I don't know, like my nerd, just me being a black woman who's a nerd, basically, and just I guess marrying all these things together because they're all me. So I love Marvel comics, but sometimes and a lot of fandoms, the way that I relate to them is, relating them to stuff that the black experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that ended up coming out just quite naturally. And I love that it did. Because if anything, that just tells me that it's okay for me to just continue to be me, and that will speak to people.
And you really bring up a fascinating point about being a black nerd, and my wife is a blurred as well, and so like I knew when I first met her that she was she had nerd cred, because the first 5 minutes of talking to her on the phone I said, who's your favorite superhero, and she said Spectrum. And I was like,
Yeah,
you're a real nerd. Okay. So when I saw Tiana Paris was cast as adult Monica Rambeau, I was geeked, because the best I could do for Christmas one year was to get her like the tiny little hero clicks of Monica Rambeau. Like it fits in,
yeah.
like it's the tiniest little thing. So now I'll be able to get her like proper, swag.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. Like so what was that last year doing during Comic Con or whatever? I've said I wasn't gonna watch the Marvel. I wasn't gonna watch any of that, or not watch it, but be on Twitter when all of that was happening. And then they started announcing stuff. I was kind of paying attention, and then they announced what was going on with WandaVision, and then they said that she was going to be on the show, and I lost it. I because I love that actress because I used to watch Survivor's Remorse, and they canceled it right when I had gotten like really into it, and I was like, but I want some more Tanya. I want some more of her. So anyway, like I think that she's a phenomenal actress. So I'm just really excited. Also the fact that she's gonna be in Captain Marvel 2 and
Mm-hmm.
then also in Loki. So that tells me like, okay, you all clearly understand the importance of this character. I pray. Because if not, then I wouldn't think that you would have
Mm-hmm.
her in so many different shows.
Yeah.
And also I'm just like, please let me write that Monica Rambeau series. Like I just want 6 issues. That's all I want.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's a great character. I'm also looking forward to seeing her realized in live action. Is just another character in a lot of ways like Big Barda that's just underappreciated and doesn't get enough time in the spotlight. We're actually really, really interested always on our podcast in the collaborative process between writers and artists. What has that experience been like for you? You do a lot of work, for example, including Living Heroes with O'Neill Jones. How does that process work? Is it very much you write a script and your artists work off of that, or is it more collaborative? What's the back and forth like?
It's been a little bit of both. I've been thankful enough that we just kind of have this synergy where, I can just write a script and she already knows like what I was thinking as I was writing it. Because the last But Would Have Throw to come out for 2020 was with the brunch place in Krakoa. And like I didn't tell her to put silhouette on the wall twerking, but she just did it. And I'm like, yeah, because you knew that I would love something like that. So there's been moments like that. The barbershop page on the back of the Living Heroes book was actually all her idea. I had mentioned it before, but not directly. I think I had tweeted something about the fact that I couldn't think of Shard without thinking of T-Boz. And she remembered that and she was like, so what if I did this? And I'm like, yes, please, absolutely. I will give you the characters. I will give you, you can have creative direction on what hairstyles you want to give them, but here are the characters. That is an amazing idea. Thank you. So we just have, again, the synergy. So I hope at some point in time, whether it be DC, Image, Marvel, or whoever, we get to work on a book professionally together. That would just be amazing. And then I've had the joy of working with multiple artists on BWIT, which has been actually, for me as a writer, a great experience. Because one, I get a feel for different artists and like who needs references, who doesn't, who needs a little bit more explanation in the script and then who doesn't, and just kind of getting used to different people's work styles, which I think has been phenomenal for me. And hopefully for them too, but at least on me on the writer side, just having more of an understanding of, trying to make my script as efficient as possible so that the artist can do what they need to do.
And one last note on Living Heroes. Can we talk about how Jennifer Walters as a white woman of color is like the greatest idea ever?
So funny enough about that, that script ended up, and that whole entire story was supposed to be another story, which would have been the hottest AF story, and both of those were like born from the same script that I was stuck on. So by the time I finished that script, I was like, what would I name this? I'm like, oh wait, because Jennifer is, while she has black friends, still respectful, but still has her moments where she just doesn't understand culturally, which is totally fine. And I was like, yeah, white woman of color. Because to me, that's how I was considering Jen in this book. I was like, I know she's white, but she's green all the time. So white woman of color definitely applies here.
So it has been officially announced. It's on Marvel's site, so we can talk about it, right? But you're going to be
Yes.
writing for next month's a piece for next month's Marvel's Voices Legacy. I've ordered probably way too many variant covers already, but what can you tell us about that project?
I can tell you that the artist that is on it is a big name artist, and I almost fainted when they told me that they would be working, like drawing my script. The inks look amazing. I wish I could share it with y'all, but again, like, yeah, I don't know. It's just wild and crazy. But the story is very much in the same energy as Living Heroes and Parenthood Activate. So it's kind of leaning in the slice of life, but there's a little bit of action at the end. But Monica and her mom, and She-Hulk and Thor are all in the same story.
Oh man, that I'm sold already.
Yeah, that's super exciting.
Yeah, when they told me to pick who I wanted, of course I picked Monica. Like that was the first. Like I couldn't send that email quick enough, but it was like Monica and her mom, and then I was like, and if it's not too much, can I also have She-Hulk and Thor? And they were like, yeah, you can. If it's not gonna, be too many people on the page, then yeah. And I was like, okay, I will figure out a way to write the story where it's not too many people on the page.
I also love just another tidbit on Monica, like her initial first appearance in that Amazing Spider-Man annual. Peter
Mhm.
Parker, like she walks onto the page and Peter Parker just immediately turns around like, whoa, who's that girl? And like Peter knows what's up. And so as my favorite superhero, Peter knows. Peter's about it.
Peter does know, so I will give him that credit
I don't
because
know why I don't know why he and Glory Grant didn't, get together.
yeah, I don't. Someone's got to bring that back because I don't even. Are he and MJ back together or not together
They're
still?
back together. That's kind of like a work in progress, but they're dating.
Okay, okay, that's fine. You know what? Side note: when they're allowed to be great, they're really great. The Amazing Spider-Man, like that, those early issues from like '89 to '92, maybe '93, and same thing with Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man are some of my fave because it's given me Big Barda and Mr. Miracle energy.
Absolutely. I love those, especially that especially there are moments when J.M. DeMatteis is writing when I love Spectacular even more than Amazing.
Yes, yes. Actually, so that was funny. Like I went from really enjoying or really loving Amazing, and then I got to what made me read Spectacular? I think there was two stories going on at the same time, and I was like, well, I need to know like what happened. I need more details. And that's when I ended up switching over to Spectacular. So I was like reading them both in tandem, and I was like, wow, you know what? This is actually really, really good. Also, a lot of butts, a lot of prominent butts during that run. Because I mean, like they kind of caught me off guard. I was like, well, I'm gonna have to find a way to write about this because this is just too much.
Now, we always end our show with our nerd commendations, nerdy shows, films, comics that we've been enjoying. Do you have anything that you would nerd commend to our listeners right now?
I do, and I apologize ahead of time because it's a fun watch, but it's also a stressful one, and that is Promise Neverland. It's an anime that is available now on Netflix, and I believe the second season starts this week, so January 9th. And wow, I didn't want to watch it at first because I saw the happy kids on the screen. I was like, I don't watch this fluff. And then what was it? I think the day after Christmas. Yes, it was the day after Christmas because I needed to wash away Wonder Woman 84 from my mind. And which a movie that has now earned a special place in my heart, which is not unfortunate, but I don't know how that happened. But anyway, I started that series, and I don't want to give anything away, but it's like the smiles that you see on the Netflix like screen. That is not, no, that's not at all the energy. Like I was stressed the entire time I watched it, and I don't know. There's been a long time since I've been stressed like that watching an animation. I think Infinity Train might be the closest, but yeah, that had me super stressed. So I highly recommend it's actually some really great storytelling.
Now I have to ask because you brought it up. I have some really complex feelings about Wonder Woman 1984. What's sort of your sense of the movie overall?
It feels like many hands were in the cookie jar and nobody got any cookies out. Like they all got crumbled up because everybody was grabbing and no one was actually getting anything. Um I really wish that they would have just picked one villain. And I know a lot of movies are like doing this now, where it's just, well, not doing this now, been doing it for a little bit, but there's got to be like two villains or more. Just give us one. And it could have just been Barbara. Not that I wasn't happy to see Pedro Pascal because I thought he was actually thought he was really great as Max Lord, just because that's Pedro Pascal. But um, focus on the budding friendship. I wish they would have done that because it would have meant way more when Barbara finally turns on Diana. And, we have our whole thing with them, but less Steve, maybe no Steve, and just give us Barbara and Diana. Yeah, just give us that. Like, I really wish we would have gotten that because I think that Cheetah is an amazing character and we don't get to see that on screen. We barely get to see Wonder Woman be Wonder Woman. Actually, Steve is Wonder Woman in this movie.
I was actually really disappointed how the whole thing, turned out with Steve because, based on the trailers, I thought there was, a mission, a rhyme, or reason, or something behind his return, but he didn't really serve really any kind of purpose in the overall plot. I didn't feel so.
No, well,
It was no reason for him to be there.
no, other than to like teach Diana how to be Wonder Woman, which is really unfortunate. It just really is. And like, hey, if they wanted to have him there, sure, I guess, but they also just kind of made it weird the way he came back. Actually, more than weird. Because I'm like, ooh, is this 92 Ghosts? Like, what are we doing? So I I really, really wish they would have done a pottery scene. It would have, I mean, nothing else in the movie really like made a lot of sense. So I just wish they would have done a pottery scene instead of the fireworks, because why not? You've already gone there, just do it. That actually would have made me appreciate it more.
We need to shoot that out to social media. We need a pottery scene between Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor. I'm sure one artist or another is going to pick up on that.
I hope so.
So I haven't seen it yet, but the overwhelming, the one of the few things that I've seen that has been positive is Pedro Pascal, and I just love everything that he does. Like, I want to cast him in everything. Like, I'm still not over the Red Viper's death from Game of Thrones. Like, I love everything that he does.
Oh, you just broke my heart bringing that up. I'm like, be quiet.
I know.
Finish him off.
Just walk away. Just walk away. He was done. You defeated him. Walk away.
Oh, you've just opened old wounds, Kris. Thanks a lot. Because I've been trying to. Oh, Game of Thrones. They are so lucky they did not do that last season in 2020, because they thought they got bad, whatever, in 2019. I couldn't even imagine them doing because everyone's for real at home.
Everybody was
So
cooped up just watching that. You know what? I didn't even watch it. I just made my wife tell me what happened, because I was like, I already just know it's going to be awful. Just tell me what happens. And she gave me the rundown. I was like, yep, I'm glad I didn't watch it. So I stopped after the Battle of Winterfell. I just had to see. I had to see my girl Arya have her moment. I had to have Arya kill the Night King, and then I knew it was going to be all trash after that.
that was so smart on your end, but I had to do it. Like, I had to finish like a fool.
So before we let you go, we have to talk about your Twitter feed, because you
Oh,
are a
boy.
must follow on Twitter, not just for the nerdy goodness, but also for the best memes and comedy on the interwebs. So how in the world are you finding all this stuff, Stephanie?
I don't know. I like to blame it on my Gemini brain because I'm thinking of multiple things at once. So, like, I don't know. Like, a lot of times when I'm reading comics, I'm probably watching reality TV show in the background. So a lot of Real Housewives of Atlanta, a lot of Potomac, Beverly Hills, all of that, and that just kind of seeps in. And then I find connections with stuff that, like, set it off in Spider-Man, because Peter, I was was rewatching the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, and I had just recently watched Set It Off, and Peter goes in to collect his money. He's like, I need that money. I'm like, oh my God, was Sam Raimi watching Set It Off? But because this sounds exactly the same. So it's just a lot of me, again, because of the way, like, I'm just processing things. A lot of stuff is just way more connected than we pay attention to, and it just always works. So, like, when I learned how to use iMovie on my phone, it was a wrap, because because it was like, all I got to do is like find this video clip, and then do this, and then here we go. Because a lot of times, like, I'll be watching something, I'm like, that is hilarious, but it would be even more hilarious if I add something to it.
So now I have Tobey Maguire in shades in that movie poster, like mead
Yes.
mugging next to Queen Latifah. It's perfect.
One day, when I'm not too tired, I might actually do a thread on the cinematic parallels between those two movies, because there actually are more. Which at first I was like, maybe you're just really tired and you're seeing this, but no, like, there are actually some more. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, this whole conversation has just been absolutely delightful. We do want to ask, where can our listeners go to support you and your work? Where can they find you online? How can they show their love and support for you?
So the easiest way right now, because the website that I have is not up yet, but if you go to my Twitter or my Instagram, it's at Steph_I_Will for both of them. In the bio is a link to my link tree, and there is the Patreon for But What If Though. There is the page to Parenthood Activate, which has a donate button, and there's also Coffee, where you can purchase either a PDF or physical book of Living Heroes. And also my authory page is on there as well, which you can subscribe to, so you don't have to like try to find all my things all over the internet. They're all right there as far as all of the articles I've written.
Can we just talk about? I just found Linktree like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Can we talk about what a revelation that is for our podcast? Like, here's our YouTube page, here's our Twitter page, here's our Instagram page. Like, just having that all in one place is so nice, rather than, oh, here's one link, here's another. But
Oh, it's so amazing.
it's so great. Stephanie, thank you so much. Thank you for Living Heroes. Thank you for just creating and cranking out beautiful content for us to enjoy. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You know, thank you guys so much for opening up your platform to have me come on. I
Absolutely.
sincerely appreciate it.
All right. Major thanks to Stephanie Williams for joining us on our Byword Big Talk. When we come back from this, our second and final break, we'll be hitting you with 2 more nerd commendations. All right, we are back for our final segment of the week, our patented nerd commendations, things that we think are awesome and nerdy that you should be enjoying as well. Dave, you're in very, very familiar territory for me. What are you nerd commending this week?
Yeah, I want to talk about some Spider-Man, which seems weird coming from me when it comes down to Dave and Chris. Chris is usually the Spider guy, but I've been away from Amazing Spider-Man for a while, and I had serious trepidations about One More Day. I was reading, Straczynski's run at the time, and how the storyline ended, the marriage between Peter and Mary Jane. It left me pretty upset. I did read some Brand New Day, and I felt like it was really not Brand New Day and more Brand Old Day. It really felt like being transported back to like the 70s or 80s era of Spider-Man comics. The stories were generally solid, but my heart just wasn't in it. And so I dropped off of Amazing. Then I came back later again and I read a bunch of Dan Slott's run, and I liked a lot of what he did. But after a while, it started feeling like his run was maybe going on a little too long, and I fell off the wagon again. And so here I am again, back to Amazing Spider-Man. This time, I binged the first 30 odd issues of Nick Spencer's run. I think I am up to about issue 34 right now. And you know what? I like it. Seeing Mary Jane play a more prominent role in the book again and rekindling her relationship with Peter, that's something that, is a lot of fun and I feel like it's been missing from the book. The sprinkling in of obscure spider history is quite good. I enjoy it. And Kindred is a really fascinating villain, but no spoilers, I'm not caught up to the current storyline yet. I love what Spencer's been doing with Boomerang as Peter's roommate. I think there's a lot of fun going on with that character. And the storyline involving Kraven, a clear sequel to Kraven's Last Hunt, was really enjoyable too. Now, I know there's been some criticism that the Kindred stuff is way too slow burn and that Spencer's run has been a bit, hit or miss. And I can't say I agree, but I also binged, 30 odd issues in about a week. So there wasn't really a slow burn for me. It was a binge after all. I would probably feel a little differently about that particular element of the story had I been reading the book, month to month. And can we talk about Patrick Gleason on Amazing Spider-Man? God, his things, good golly. I loved his work at DC, especially on the Green Lantern franchise, and boy, oh boy, he's only gotten better, if that were even possible. His art looks like he's having the time of his life on Amazing Spider-Man. It's just a visual feast. So yeah, if you can binge some Nick Spencer Spidey, do it. I mean, the slow burn stuff might go down a little easier if you're binging it. All I can tell you for sure is that I'm really enjoying what I've read so far.
Yeah, I see. I'm contrarian to what a lot of Spider-Man fans are online about the Nick Spencer run. I enjoy it by and large, and for the most parts, it does have a couple of lulls for me. But when it is that, it's usually a single issue, and it's usually like an inventory issue as they're kind of bridging between arcs. For me, the biggest bone that I have to pick, and maybe we can talk about this there when you're caught up a little bit more, is the Last Remains arc said that it was going to be done with issue 55, and there was still a lot left unsaid and unsettled at the end of the Last Remains arc. And now, since then, when we talked to Frank Martin about this, and he and I kind of shared that opinion, issues 56 and 57 have come out. A lot more is played out. But if I had to give an overall verdict, I think Spencer is an incredibly strong writer. And I really enjoy that the issue number 1, where they're dealing with those aliens attacks, and the first intro of Kindred. It was just amazing, pun intended. And then you nailed it between Ryan Ottley and then transitioning to Patrick Gleason. That's like Hall of Famer to Hall of Famer, like transitioning. That's like Joe Montana to Steve Young, for me. Like it's just beautiful. And just wait till you get to The Last Remains. That's The Last Remains. I really really enjoy. Am enjoying it, and it's really well written. But the art from Gleason when he draws Kindred, it's just something that is otherworldly, and is just beautiful. But I'm enjoying it by and large, the Spencer run, and I think it was a much needed update. I love Dan Slott, love that what he was able to do with the character. But after 10 years, it was time for a transition, and it was a much needed breath of new life, I think.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the good things about the American comic book market as compared to something like, manga, is just, although I think sometimes having a singular vision is a good thing, in the case of manga, for example, there is usually an end point that eventually arrives. But if you're going to have this never-ending soap opera of the American comic book market, then yes, you do need to switch up writers and artists. You just have to, otherwise it gets stale.
Yeah.
And so, as much as I enjoyed Dan Slott's run, I was starting to spin my wheels a little bit about halfway into it, where I was starting to feel like it was all just a little samey. I felt like I kind of had learned all of Dan Slott's tricks. Nothing was really surprising me anymore. I'm talking like, post Superior Spider-Man, basically things just started. It was like almost like Dan Slott's magnum opus was Superior Spider-Man, and then he came back from that, and it just never quite hit the same stride again.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, so having this switch up, I think, is really good. I've really enjoyed these 30 some issues. I'm gonna probably spend the next week or so trying to get up to date on Spencer's run, but I'm really enjoying it, and it's nice to enjoy a Spider-Man book. Without feeling like it's pushing me away with stuff like One More Day, or feeling like just an old retread of storylines I've seen before. It's doing enough new stuff that I'm really enjoying it.
I totally agree. And to your point about switching up creative teams, I talked about Donny Cates taking over Thor from Jason Aaron after 7 or 8 years. And what I loved about that seamless transition is it seems like Jason Aaron had like a clear 7-year plan for Thor, and he left exactly when he wanted to from the book. When he finished the King Thor miniseries, issue 4 of King Thor, it was a perfect time to walk away. And it's like like we've talked about it before, like when you binge a show and it like has fewer episodes rather than more. And I think that's one of the strengths of something like The Mandalorian, like keep you hungry for more rather than playing it out for so long to where you're like, oh, it's almost like a chore where you have to read it, like, oh, here's another issue of ASM, I guess I got to read this because I've been following this book. And when you like position it perfectly, it keeps the fun alive for enjoying that character.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, you are going to Hulu and recommending a television series. What do you got?
So, I missed having our nerd commendations in the month of October, but pun intended, I think you guys created a monster with this nerd nightmare thing, because I'm recommending a show about vampires. Never would have thought that before. But then again, it's the guy that I will follow to the ends of the earth. It's Taika Waititi. I'm talking about What We Do in the Shadows. It's a series on Hulu, has 2 seasons, really quick. You can fly through it, 22-minute episodes, really fantastic. And it's everything. I mean, it's everything you would think a Taika Waititi production would be. It's a series that he co-produces, co-directs with Jermaine Clement. If you know Moana, Tamatoa, the crab shiny, that's Jermaine Clement. So like they do it together, and it's just comedic genius. And it's so basically the premise of the show is it's this documentary that follows around 3 vampires that live on Staten Island, and it's just a bunch of hilarious nonsense that ensues. Kevin Novak plays Nandor the Relentless. He's a vampire from the Ottoman Empire. Matt Berry plays Laszlo. Natasha Demetro plays his wife Nadia. And then Harvey Guillen plays Guillermo, Nandor's familiar. And then Mark Proksch, if you watch the latter seasons of The Office, Nate, he plays Colin Robinson, who is a psychic vampire or an energy vampire. And he's just that boring guy in the office that talks to you. And by boring you to death, that's how he feeds. He doesn't bite your neck and suck your blood. He just talks you to death and annoys the crap out of you. So it's just like a really, really funny show that it's just off the wall and bonkers. Just think like Thor Ragnarok or something from the mind of Taika Waititi that is just played out over a series. So it's like a slow burn, and it's just like this beautiful thing. And it has, I want to say like the best thing about it is like the guest star roles are just pitch perfect. Like Nick Kroll comes on for an episode as Simon the Devious, and he's like a nightclub owner in Manhattan. Taika himself and Jermaine Clement are part of like this vampire council. I'm pretty sure in an episode that I haven't watched yet that Mark Hamill is even a vampire. Yeah, Jim the Vampire in an episode in the second season. So it's just really, really great. It's just super funny. Like I can't recommend it enough. So What We Do in the Shadows on Hulu, you'll binge through it really, really quickly.
You know, after Thor Ragnarok, I instantly knew I was going to like Taika Waititi's work, and I will admit I'd barely even heard of this show. I know you had mentioned it in passing a couple of times, but other than that, I've been pretty much clueless. The way you described the show, it sounds like a lot of fun, though, and as a fan of horror movies, I love a good twist on some scary creatures. Vampires, as long as they don't sparkle, are some of my favorite horror movie monsters, so seeing them in this kind of comedic setting would no doubt be fun, especially with Waititi's touch of humor. So I really think I need to give this one a whirl.
Oh yeah, I mean it's as advertised. It's just hilarious. Like I have to say that like Natasha Demetro as Nadia, she's just a revelation. She's super funny. She's super charged. Like she's just hilarious. Every line that she has is hilarious. She's a big star in the UK. She's also on this series called Stath Lets Flats. It's about it's on HBO Max, I think. It's about like these Greek immigrants in the UK that try and sell flats, apartments in London, and it's just so funny. But like it's some of that like British humor, I guess, too. So maybe that's why I'm a big fan of Brit humor. It's just like really like intellectual humor as well, and it's just so funny. I can't recommend it enough.
Well, I'm there for it.
All right, nerds, that wraps up another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. Thank you so much for joining in. Thanks to Stephanie Williams for joining us today. Be sure to check her out on Twitter at Steph_I_Will. And be on the lookout for Marvel Voices Legacy next month.
And as always, if you enjoy our podcast, please give us a rating or review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're available everywhere podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter at NerdByword or individually at ThatNerdChris and at ThatNerdDave.
You can also hit us up on Instagram at the same call signs. That's at NerdByword for the show's page. Individually, at ThatNerdDave and at ThatNerdChris. Also, be sure to check out Dave's writing website, ThatNerdDave.com, where he just released the very first incarnation of Tomb Raider Thursdays. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez and show art by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.